What up, guys? So it is the following week at the time of recording this, the following week to the ADCC West Coast Trials 2024. And so I figured what we would do, because anytime I go to the trials tournament or championship tournament, I always like my phone. I'm always jotting things down on it. If you guys ever see me at those tournaments, a lot of times I'm just jotting down ideas on my phone and probably not texting all that much. But I like taking the ideas down as they come, because when I go to those tournaments, you just see so many different little things that pop up, both technical transitions that I find interesting or something maybe work on, or notes to go back and watch a particular match later on, because I'm like, oh, I'll see something and I want to watch a match later on. But then there's just random ideas that come from those tournaments. And so what we're going to dive into today is more than a few, but a collection of ideas or occurrences or things that came from the trials this past weekend, and some ideas that could be useful to you depending on your training and the situation you're in. Obviously, it'll have a competition sort of slant to it, but there are ideas in it that are sort of universal, regardless of whether or not you plan to compete on any high level or not. So again, hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast and get something from it. Also, for those of you that I met in Las Vegas this past weekend, who, you said you listened to the podcast, you watched the videos, you read the emails, that kind of thing. It was cool meeting you guys. Some of you guys for the first time, some of you guys, this is several times that we've met, but it was really cool to come in contact with you guys. I know there was one person who came up and he said that he had tried to listen to a number of different jiu-jitsu podcasts. He's like, for whatever reason, they didn't sort of click with him. He's like, I like yours. He's like, one you guys do, it's great. And he's like, that becomes his one that he listens to for the last couple of years. So appreciate you guys, and thanks for the support. Also, thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen, so you can hear our beautiful voices come to your ears every single week. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys have never checked them out, give them a try. If you're interested in CBD products, you've never tried it before, or especially if you're a little bit on the older side, if you're getting to that point where you'd like to try some stuff for recovery, they are the premier CBD company that's out there. I think they're one of the first ones that I've ever heard of being out there. And again, they're third-party tested to ensure the purity of what's in the product, so you're not getting any funky stuff in there. They have options that are their THC free versions, where you can, if you get tested for certain compounds, that might be the right option for you. And they also have a lot of different products that they're always creating to test out the CBD products that are out there. I think they're coming out with a sleep one soon.
Yeah, it's a CBN. It's exclusively a CBN. It's like and the research, there's some research too I can actually share in the show notes. Basically, it doesn't help you fall asleep, but it helps you stay asleep. That's the main thing with purely CBN. So you will have a more restful sleep, and you'll wake up less time. So that's kind of one of the new ones, but that one's a CBN.
So I remember, was it them that gave us a CBN based product like a couple of years ago?
We might have had one.
So I remember,
this is a gummy, by the way.
Okay, because I remember they gave us like a spray. Remember the spray?
Yeah.
So I remember
sleep spray or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I remember it was a CBN product, and that worked pretty darn well. And I remember that was especially helpful to me when I was having that sleep issue back a couple of years ago, which for me, looking back on it, was a lot of having my nervous system ramped up, being working a little too hard, training a little too hard, and trying to push myself too much, and then getting kind of anxious about the whole sleep situation. I would use that on some nights, and it would help me sleep.
Yep.
It would help me, because what was happening with me is I'd go to sleep and I'd pop right up, and then I'd be up, and I remember when if I was having trouble with that, I would take that and it would help knock me out.
Yeah. It's called Stay Asleep. So these are like the CBN gummies. I'm trying to see what else.
We'll have to try those out and give you guys a.
We're getting some in, so we're gonna.
Okay, cool. So we'll try those out. Let you guys know. But again, if you guys want to check out any of their products, go to their website, charlottesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu 30 for 30% off the order on whatever you buy. And again, it'll give you a great discount on some great products, and you can try it out and see how it works for you. Also, thanks to Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. They make everything from gear like gis, rash guards, and shorts, that kind of stuff, to hoodies, joggers, anything related to jiu-jitsu that you might want as far as gear and merchandise go. They make it. Again, I'm a big fan of his rash guards and his shorts. I like them. They also make the short versions, or the longer short version, whatever you prefer. But whatever it is that you go in there and if you go to the website at epicrollbjj.com, you can save 20% on the order by using the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off. And guys, also thanks to our sponsor, Manscaped. for helping make the podcast happen. Manscaped has been providing Eugene and I with a number of different products for the last few years. Again, they originally, I feel like a few years ago, they were all about like ball care. Their whole like little niche in the manscaping, the male grooming market was, all about your balls. So like they, originally I remember they were like, hey, like sending us the information they wanted us to share. And it was like, all about your balls. And I was like, I don't really want to talk about my balls on the internet. Just, not really wanting to. But I remember using their products. I was like, man, their products are really amazing. They're actually, it's like, it's one of those things where it's hard to make anything special about a utility, like something that's very, like, a pair of nail clippers or a trimmer, it's like those things, they're not very exciting, but their products are legit. Like, I know as simple as it seems, like their nail trimmers, like I can trim my nails with them and there's no hang nails. There's no like roughness afterwards. So I keep those around for with my jiu-jitsu stuff. So this way I'm trimming them down. Very simple stuff. And in there, even with their beard trimmer, like which I use, it's got the little adjustable dial. And I'm sure some other companies done it before, but again, it's my first time. I used to always have to switch the guards out and everything else. They make good products. So if you are a man or you have a man in your life that wants to step up their grooming game or get some new products for them, whatever you need, everything from body washes and colognes to trimmers for whatever part of your body you want to trim, check them out at manscaped.com. If you find something you like, you can save 20% off the order and get free shipping using the promo code Chewjitsu20 at checkout. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can check out our Patreon. We just had 3 new Patreon people subscribe. So thank you guys this past week for joining up, and appreciate you for the support. If you guys want to check it out yourself, you can go to the website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. You'll support the podcast. And then on top of that, you'll get access to the exclusive library of content that we've been creating for the last few years. A couple of pieces that are generally pretty interesting for most people or useful for most people are the interviews where we've done with guests, where we ask them about a very specific training tip that they could share, something that would actually help your training, whether that be a specific technique or maybe just a training idea, philosophy, whatever it might be. And then Eugene's got some warm-up/stretching routines, which are about 20 minutes long, and they could support you with being less injury prone and also being a little bit more flexible on the mat, which can be useful. And then I have some of my seminars that I recorded, put up there. So this way you can get access to those as well. And there's a lot more other stuff. But again, if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast and give it a look. Also, guys, if you want to get my daily email that I send out, you can check that out at chewjitsu.net/join. Also, just a heads up for those of you guys, if you're interested, I have 2 free ebooks that I give away when you join currently. One is on drilling strategies to get more from your training and implement new techniques. The other one is for developing your own jiu-jitsu game plan. And those are given away currently when you join up. Now, those are going to be going away sometime in the next month, and I'll be replacing it with a new thing. And those other ebooks will be a part of other products that I'm creating. So if you want to get the free ones, those 2 ebooks right now while they're still available, go to the website, chewjitsu.net/join, get them. You can join up. You'll get my daily email, and you can enjoy the emails that are coming out and unsubscribe at any time. And then, guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast. So, guys, let's jump into this podcast talking about the ADCC trials from 2024 West Coast. Also, I just want to share that we'll have some upcoming podcast interviews and episodes and just conversations really with some of the trials winners and some of the people that placed at trials. So should be super interesting for you guys. I always like talking to the people at trials because like a couple of years ago, there were a few people at trials. I'm like, we have to talk to them because they're going to be big at some point. Like one of them was Amy. Remember, I was like,
Amy Campo.
Yep. I was like, Amy, we have to talk to her because I was like, I could just tell she was just different. And then she went out there and won the damn thing.
Yeah, beat Gabby.
Yeah, and I was like, I watch her. I just know she just had such an interesting way of moving, and you could just tell. So a lot of times the trials, you get these standouts, and you're like looking at them, and you're thinking, okay, this person's going to be something. So there's going to be a few of those people that we will talk to, people that are probably maybe flying under your radar that you don't know about, or possibly people to look for in the future. And this should be fun. But right now, let's talk about what happened this past weekend. And again, I'm not going to go through the technical transitional stuff because trying to explain, like I've listened to a couple jiu-jitsu podcasts and are trying to talk about technical transitions, and it's so hard to like talk about that without being able to move and show. But we can talk about some ideas that could be very useful. Number one, and these are in no specific order, okay, is that watching there were several of the trials winners and placers who were former losers at the trial, meaning people that got put out very early in the trials, or people who, there was in one case, there was a person who made it to the finals and lost by a very small strategic mistake, but people that have lost these trials and they came back this time and they won. They either won first place or they medaled in some cases, depending on the situation. And I think that's important because it's so easy to forget that all of these people that we look to and that we are like, man, they're so good. They're all losing and winning at times. Even Gordon, you go back far enough and, Gordon didn't just come through and mop up everybody at the trials, right? He lost matches too, before he became, the person that he is now. And so I just think that's important because like in my office, I have a little metal wall hanging, like a little decorative metal wall hanging, and it's the Tree of Life. You've probably seen it before, where if you look at it, it's almost like you see these different balancing symbols in different like mythologies and religions and traditions. And, you think of yin and yang. This one is the Tree of Life, where if you look at it, it's got equal parts of this tree growing up, and then there's equal parts growing down, right? And I think that's kind of an important thing because we like to focus on the upward stuff. Like when you're going to a tournament, you're literally focused on going up, ascending to the top of the podium. That's the goal, right? But the downside of it, that when we go down, when we grow down, that's an equally important part. So like you think about when you lose a tournament, what do? How do you react to that? Like, do you do the right things and then extract the lessons to be made from them or whatever? Do you just kind of, ignore it because you don't like the way it makes you feel or something, right? Because it hurts the ego a little bit, or get frustrated, whatever. How do you do this in the gym? How do you respond to people in the gym when they beat you and get frustrated by it, right? So the growing down is important. This is why it's cliche, but it's true. They'll say that a champion's not defined by how they win, but by how they lose, right? And so I think it's an important symbol, but it's an important thought. If you compete and you do jiu-jitsu in any fashion, right, whether you compete or not, you're going to go through these rise and falls. Just what's going to happen. You can't control the falls. They're just going to happen sometimes. You can only control how you respond to them and whether or not you grow down or you stay down. And if you want to think about it just like a tree, right? Like if its root system grows and becomes strong, it can start to spread out into the sky. But if that root system's weak, it's going to get uprooted, right? Same thing if my wife and I were planting these native plants that are, basically they're native to our region, and they take a long time to flower and grow up to be like these really beautiful plants that they become because they spend such a large amount of their time early on digging this root system. So they'll have this really long, deep tap root that gets into the ground where if you pull one of these suckers up, it's like some cases like a foot long for this like little plant that's barely sprouting on top. And it gets that root system set first, and then it starts to just bloom up. And so that's an interesting thing, right? It's like you look at a pyramid, the breadth of the base determines the height. And for a lot of people, for all of us, right, what's going to determine how high we go, how good we become, really is based off of like, how do we deal with the downsides of stuff? This is something that really helped me out a long time, was early on when in my competition, because, I've always enjoyed competing. I had a really hard time focusing on my losses and actually learning from them and getting the real lessons from them, because I didn't like them. I didn't like losing. And so I never really got the lessons from them. I would ignore them. And then, between my coach forcing me into different positions and eventually you just kind of wisen up a little bit, moving towards some of those positions of my weaknesses, the areas that weren't comfortable and that sorts of thing, those things began to help out. And so I think that, again, just something to think about. A lot of the winners today were losers yesterday. The winners of today will become losers tomorrow. Again, it's just this cyclical thing. It's going up and down all the time. And I just think it's just something to sort of chew on when you're looking at it, so that maybe you're having a loss, maybe you're having a rough day, maybe you're not doing so well. Okay, it happens to all of us, everyone. You're not the only one. And so not that that's helpful to you, but maybe it's comforting to understand that everybody goes through it, and it's a struggle. But again, how you go down, how you grow down will determine what happens and how you go up.
Yeah. I think reps, like you said, like competing, being maybe losing at trials before, and then competing, getting getting reps, getting comfortable, you know.
What's what happened to Brandon?
Yeah, it's high intensity, it's high level. And Brandon Reed, congrats. He got third in trials, over 99 kilos. And I mean, he's done 3 of these trials.
This is the third one.
I think it was 1-1, 4-1,
5-1,
and then 5-1. So anyway, he kind of got closer and closer. And I think reps and doing it over and learning from your mistakes, I think is incredible. Like for me personally, you know, the amount I've competed is not a ton, but every time I've competed, I get the itch right afterwards to get back out there because like that wasn't that bad, and I learned some stuff. I want to get back out there and do it. So for anyone that, you know, obviously like we talked about a little bit off the show before we got started, is like if you want to get good at these things, you got to do them.
Well, and that's something that was another lesson from it. So I talked to several people who were at the tournament, who were on the younger side as far as like experience goes. You know, they've been trained for like, you know, 5 to 8 years, and they're like, you know, man, I went out there, competed, and you know, the like one guy, he went like 2-1. He won a couple matches, and then he ran into one of the favorites for the tournament, and he was talking to me, and he said, man, like, you know, I do a lot of fight to wins, and a lot of these super fight style matches.
He's like one-off type.
One-off, right? Now he's at this tournament. He's like, you know, and this is a big one for him. And I was like, he's like, you know, how do you prepare for this? I asked him, I said, well, you know, did you struggle at all with the nerves of, because this is an intense tournament. There's a big thing on the line when you win, right? You get to go to the big show. So it's an intense tournament. And I asked him, I was like, was that weighing on you? And he said, yeah, you know, I was nervous about it. I was a little jittery. And, you know, during the matches, he was having trouble focusing on just the match because he knew he might have 5 more in front of him. You know, and again, this is always the case. You never focus on the next one. It's always this one. This is the only one that matters in the moment. You dump everything out to win this match, because if not, you may not win, right? But to the other part, with these tournaments, sometimes you have to go to them. Not everybody's this way, but sometimes you just have to go to these kinds of competitions if it's something you want to win, because you have to feel it. You have to get to these tournaments and just feel what that feels like. You know, like when I did my first trials, my first and only trials in 18, and I took 3rd, and I felt fine.
Yeah, you did great.
But I only felt that way because I'd been competing for damn near 20 years. And I'd been to some big tournaments. But when you go to one of these big tournaments, it sort of, it messes with you a little bit sometimes. I know that back in high school, we always talked about this, where, you know, you'd have a guy, whenever you went to your first state tournament, if you made it to state, usually you were a little less good. You were a little worse, because it would always, like, you'd get guy and they'd be killing it. And then their first state tournament, they would always just be a little shaky, a little off.
Yeah.
And they'd feel like they just couldn't get their legs under them, you know, because it was a big deal. You went from competing in a small high school gymnasium where nobody's really watching. And then we would be at this big convention, this big sports center in Frankfurt, in the capital. And I mean, you'd have thousands of people there, and you'd have these giant mats there, and you would go down to this. It was like you'd go into this bullpen, like stadium style. So you have a stadium of people watching, and it's not even that it's the stadium that was so important. It was just that it was your only matches for that was lost these matches, it for the year.
It's over.
And so, you know, it was always that first tournament that first state tournament, people tended to perform less than they usually did. And so again, sometimes with these, if you've never experienced a big competition before, the intensity could be a little different. And so you need to go out and do them. And in fact, I would tell you to do them earlier than maybe what you think you should sometimes. This is even like people competing. If someone's going to compete, I tell them to get out and do it fairly soon. We don't want you're comfortable and you're doing well in your gym. You know, if you're getting smashed by everybody, hey, maybe wait a little bit. But if you're competing and you're competitive with your other like white belts, your other blue belts, or whatever belt level you're at, that's probably a good sign that you can go compete. And when you go compete, your first couple of competitions, if you've never competed in jiu-jitsu before and never done a one-on-one competition, is just about getting out there and experiencing it. So this way, you know what you're getting ready for, because it's hard to know what you're getting ready for until you've experienced it. It's the old sort of, you know, maxim, you only know once you know. It's very easy to explain and talk about something, but everybody understands that there's sometimes where once you have a visceral experience with something, it's like, oh, that's it. Because like, for instance, when you go into the gym, first time you see jiu-jitsu, you think to yourself, oh, I can do that. Hey, it looks pretty easy.
Yeah.
And you're watching guys roll around. I can do that. You know, I thought that I wrestled and I looked at it and thought, oh, I'll be fine. I'll be like a blue belt. And then I got out there and I got just creamed by everybody. And instantly you're thinking to yourself, I get it. Okay. Now I know. Sometimes you don't know until you know. So with your competitions, if you feel if you go to these things and you're feeling a little shaky, understand that's kind of the part of the process. You have to get out there and do it. You know, and a lot of these people that won the tournaments, this is not their first competition. They have a long competition history. They've been competing a lot over the years. And so this is not just a random, hey, I decided to do this on my first tournament. I won. I don't know of anybody that won trials or any of these big tournaments in their first try. Usually there is a buildup to it. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I'm saying it's very unlikely. And if someone did do it, it's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. The unique thing about the trials is you get like the highest level competitor, and you can also get your average person because anybody can enter, right? So it's like, if I was just thinking about this the other day, I was like, you could be like someone that thinks they're good, but you're just like, I just need my shot. Like you can make your shot.
You can make it there.
You can make it. Like you can literally like be like, man, it's not like I have to work my way up through the ranks. You could literally go to this tournament that allows you to get into the biggest grappling tournament in the world, in my opinion, for jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
And I think like it's such a unique thing that we have that in this sport or in this martial art, that you actually have the capability to say, I'm that good, and I can go and prove it and get my shot right away.
Yeah.
But then you got people that go in there and like, they have no business being out there.
That's true.
And they go against somebody like, Andy Varela, who's just, because he made a comment about it. Like he's like the first couple rounds, you can get some pretty easy rounds. You can, especially those guys that are like ranked, that have been competing, and you're getting ranked a little higher. So you get some of the lower end guys.
But in some cases, there were a couple guys that were like, they were very good college wrestlers who had just never done. And they came in and they weren't ranked, they weren't seated high, and they came in, and so those weren't easy rounds.
That's Brandon too when he first started.
Well, Brandon he didn't get seated. He got seated a little bit better, but not great last time. At the East Coast Trials.
In his second one.
In his second one, he got seated okay, but not great.
Right.
And then the first time he got seated really poorly, but he ended up going against Kyle. We'll talk more about styles.
Kyle Bain,
and Kyle Bain, made short work of him with his inexperience. I think it would be a little different now. I think Kyle may still get him, but he would be able to have better understanding, because at this point he was still very fresh. But had he ended up on a different side of the bracket, where all the guys were just trying to wrestle, I think he probably could have made it pretty deep into the tournament, because the plus 99 division, so much of it's wrestling. And again, I'm not saying that he'll never get out wrestled by someone, but at that time, I didn't see anybody in the bracket that was going to out wrestle him, because again, he's such a technical, fast heavyweight that it's one of those things where it throws people off, because it's hard to train for someone who has a style and a body type that they don't exist very often.
Right.
It's like if you have a guy who's like 6'8" or something, it's hard to train for that, because how many people are 6'8"? And like when you have a 260-pound guy who moves like he's 160 pounds and incredibly technical, because he's always been a small heavyweight, in the divisions, it's really tough to deal with, because there's not a lot of those guys out there. There's not a lot of those caliber people out there. And this is something where, this is off on another side note. A lot of times you will see people in jiu-jitsu who know nothing about wrestling. This is very common in jiu-jitsu, where they'll see like, this guy was a D1 wrestler, and then they'll see that person going up, let's say D2 or NAIA, and they instantly think the person from D1's better. And then at this tournament, like, this was not the case. Like there were guys, like for instance, the minus 99, he was a D2 champ, right? D2, but he beat some D1 guys.
Yeah.
Made short work of him. It's like, again, this is one of those things where there's a letter next to those people's names, but again, it comes down to who they are. And you got to think about, sometimes these guys, for instance, Brandon, he could have wrestled D1. He had offers.
Absolutely.
But he got a free education to go NAIA. So he got out of school. He was a champion for 3 years, and he had a free education that he didn't have to pay for. He has no debt. Like, why would he exchange that for a letter next to his name?
Well,
you know what I mean?
That's the thing. You have to educate people, because people are going to automatically assume that you're not as good as these D1 guys just because you're NAI or D3 or D2, whatever, when it's just your situation. Maybe you chose something that was more advantageous to your life, and you're thinking, am I going to make a career out of wrestling, or am I going to use wrestling to obviously do the best I can, get the most out of this sport, and also get, obviously, how many professional or like wrestlers that do that style of wrestling, not pro wrestlers, but that do college wrestling, how many of them make it to the Olympics? Very few. How many make a career out of it? Very few, right? You either go MMA, or you do you start a gym or coach or something like that, but you really don't make a career unless you're an Olympian, and some of those guys don't really make careers out of it either. So the money's just not there. So you got to be smart about it.
Yeah. And so it's just something to keep in mind. Like when yes, there are some amazing D1 wrestlers that will smash
100%.
people, whatever. But like, again, just because there's a letter next to someone's name does not mean that that person's instantly better.
Well, you could look at the other example is
it's like saying like this person's a black belt and this person's a purple belt. These are just little titles that they have. But like, again, you know, several of the winners were not black
belts or like early into their purple belt.
Yeah. So again,
Brandon's a purple belt. He beats some black belts.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's
just the way it is.
Yep.
Here's another one. So I was talking to a lot of this is like a younger term, I think. But I was talking a lot to these younger guys, and they would either refer to something as, or ask me if there was a quote meta. So they'd be, oh man, this is the meta.
You had to explain that to me. I was like, what the hell is that?
So like, if you think of like metaphysical, where it's basically this overarching thing that encompasses things, right? So like, you know, if it was the meta, it would be the thing that everybody's doing. So, you know, maybe a few years ago, almost a little over a decade ago, it would have been like Berimbolo. Oh, it's the meta right now because it's like kind of the new trend.
Yeah.
But my thing is like, you know, I'd always talk to these guys, and, you know, if they ask me, they said, you know, is there like, what do you think the meta is right now? Like, there is no meta. Like there is no one style that's going to beat everything. When you look at a tournament, there are certain transitions that will pop up. There's trends depending on the tournament. There are trends that you'll see over and over again, and it's a good idea to train those transitions, such as like transitions from turtle. Because, for instance, in ADCC, you will see a lot of turtle transitions because the tournament incentivizes turtling. Because let's say if I take you down and you turtle, no points. If someone gets a sweep and someone gets to the turtle, no points.
Yep.
If we, you know what, it doesn't matter. If we get to turtle, just negates everything. So you get a lot of turtling. And so there's a lot of back takes and transitions from the turtle. And so with that, there is no meta. There's no one technique or style that's just going to destroy everything. There's trends, but at the end of the day, it's always been this way. Always will be. It's your style versus someone else's style, and how you use your style in conjunction with the rules that you're sort of faced with. That's what it comes down to. You know, that's how you win matches, right? So for instance, if you know that, let's say, okay, you're up against a superior wrestler, you have no chance of taking them down. Well, then it will be a stupid idea in an ADCC format to stand with him and wrestle when the points rounds are going on, because you're just giving that person a 2-point lead, because they're going to take you down and then you're going to be down in the hole. Why would you do that? Not a smart move. You need to pull guard, regardless of whether or not you want to. You're going to have to pull guard. That's going to be your ticket to win, right? Or in some cases, like with Brandon, two of the guys, like we were talking about that he had in the first 2 rounds of the second day, they were big guys, like really big guys, close to 300, I would imagine, plus pounds. Super nice guys. And they both played a smart game plan where they were trying to pull him into full guard, lock him up to stop him moving, which was a smart move, because if you could lock your legs around him and stop him from bouncing around, that's going to be in your advantage. And so with both of these guys, the whole game plan was to stay active and move, to wear them out a little bit, and then cut angles on them and go side to side, and then try to look for the quick pass, right? And then again, that's what he was doing, was trying to look for that quick movement when he felt the opportunity. And again, that was looking at it from his game plan. Now, if he was facing someone that was going to wrestle with him, or if he was facing someone that had a completely different guard style, then we would change the game plan. But you're always trying to look at that. How does my style work for this particular tournament? And then how can I use it against this person successfully? An example from my own experience was back in 2016. I remember I was going up against a guy who, at the Pans, who had a great half guard. And I watched his matches before, and every time he got someone into half guard, he swept them and won the match. So I was like, I don't want to give the person a chance.
Yep.
Because why am I going to, I'm a good half guard player. I'm great at passing half guard. But the issue is, why would I give him a chance to be in his best position? So when I went against him, my whole thing was, I'm going to do standing passing. I'm not going to drop down, because if I standing pass, you can't play half guard. You're going to have to pull me down, which is going to be tough. And so I never went to half guard, but for like a split second, I immediately bounced out of it, and he never was able to get to his half guard. Now, could I have passed his half guard? Who knows? But I made sure never to get there. And in turn, I ended up, scoring like 16 points plus, and then ended up getting submission.
Yep.
And so again, you have to understand, like, okay, how does my style work? And then this sort of thing. And so that's just kind of an idea to consider. There is no meta. There is no silver bullet that will end all of your problems and give you the advantage. Because, even when a new position or technique sort of pops onto the scene, which a lot of times is not a new position or technique. It's sort of like a revisited old one that someone's sort of developed a little bit. But nonetheless, something new comes out on the scene, whatever advantage it has by being sort of a novelty or new, it's short-lived because everybody adapts pretty darn quickly. But just kind of keep that in mind with your training. Don't go looking for the silver bullet. Your job as a competitor or even a jiu-jitsu practitioner in your gym is to find the techniques that work for your style, and then it's to just go down that rabbit hole and use them and make them really good and learn how you wield them. Because again, if you go to the ADCC and watch all the different competitors, so many different styles, so many different strategies were being used. And so again, there isn't like one that's going to beat the rest of them. You had guys like the Tackett brothers and Andy Varela and, Pixley, who literally just came out there to finish. They did not really change their pace at all. And then you had other people that were playing a really strategic, sort of slower pace in the non-points rounds, kicked it up in the points rounds. And then you had other people that were doing legs. Some people were doing guard passing and takedown. I mean, it just changes.
Yeah. Is there maybe one distinction or a couple distinctions from 2018 when you won or when you got third versus to 2024 now? Is there anything that maybe you can, maybe the size of the tournament possibly has changed, but is there anything you think has changed or like evolved, or maybe something that you've seen that's very different than it was 6 years ago?
I mean, the size is bigger, obviously. I mean, what we're doing now is really what they did is the old, like when I did the ADCC in 2018, it was essentially the same size as the second day. So like, because I think I had.
Was yours one day? All one day?
One day. And I had, like in my division, I think it was like 68 or 69 people.
Just huge.
It's a big division, right? So you're still playing, like they still have the 32-man division plus like you have a 32 round or whatever division, whatever it is. But it was a tough tournament, a lot of people. But now what they do is they have all these extras and they clear them out in the first day, and then they go into the second day afterwards, right? And so again, the big tournaments are bigger. The venues are obviously bigger now. Like back in when I was there, it was like we were in a high school. It's been that way for a long time. It's not just in high school, which doesn't bother me, right? Now they're in these nice little hotel conventions and stuff like that, and there's a little bit more buzz around it. As far as the actual like the competition itself, most of it's the same. One of the things that seems like it's a little different is the out of bounds rule.
Yeah.
So at the ADCC, when I was competing, you'd like when it went out of bounds, you stopped it. Mm-hmm. Right. So there were a couple times where I was shooting takedowns, taking guys down or doing sweeps on them, and we go out of bounds and they'd stop it. Right. Normal stuff. Like now they let people go out of bounds, and you'll have these situations where people are fighting over in the carpet, or fighting on someone else's mat, or in the finals, they're someone's being taken down and they're taken down into a group of people. And now there's this crowd of people around them fighting like it's like Lionheart from the 1980s, the movie. And so you see that. I'm not really a fan of that rule. And I think eventually someone will probably get hurt and they'll probably stop it. Maybe just make the mats bigger, so that you don't go out of bounds as much. But that's a little different. And then the styles are evolving, right? You're seeing these younger people come up who are just friggin' slick. I mean, like some of these younger grapplers, I mean, they're amazing. And so you see them coming up and doing their thing. And so it is tougher for the older crew to stay like relevant in some of those divisions.
Yeah. Maybe we talked about the belt ranks being a little, do the belts really matter?
Not when it comes to competition.
Yeah, not so much.
Not when competition. When we talk about like the belt ranks means something when we're talking about overall knowledge and your time in and, those sorts of things, like that matters. But as far as actual competing goes, they don't, because especially when you're talking about let's say, a person who's been wrestling since they were 6 and they've been doing jiu-jitsu. Now they're a purple belt. That person is an amazing purple belt. And as far as competitive goes, they can compete with almost any black belt out there. The belt's a formality. The belt's simply just like, well, maybe you don't have the knowledge. Maybe you've only been doing this for, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So we still don't want to give you a black belt because, you got to put your time in just like everybody else. But as far as like executable skills and having a specific game plan that they can execute on someone, yeah, they're great. I mean, that's the thing to think about competing versus say like coaching or whatever it might be. A competitor can get by on a lot less, because as you're a competitor, you'll be good, but really what you're trying to do is use a small amount of jiu-jitsu that you've develop to a razor sharp point against someone. Now you have to know the defenses and stuff to a lot of different things, but you don't have to know it good enough to teach it. And there's a different way of like knowing something and how to teach. That's a different skill set than saying just knowing it to where you can do it. When it comes to black belts, it just a lot of times it just comes down to time on the mats and that sort of thing. So when it comes to competitions, belts don't really matter that much.
We actually mentioned something. You talked to some people and they mentioned injuries, that there are a lot of kind of dealing with injuries. So
yeah, so
chat about that.
You know, when people compete, a lot of times everybody's wanting to have this, because when you think about it, you got to train really hard for a big competition, right?
Yes.
And a lot of times people, they want to train hard and they end up catching an injury or two. And then when they go to the competition, it's worrying them. And the thing that I would probably tell most of you guys is that most people that are competing they've got some injuries.
Yeah.
When I was talking to several of the people that medaled or won, they all had injuries. There was something jacked up on all of them. You know, they're all favoring something, and you know they kept it to themselves before the tournament. Once the matches were over, they're like, oh man, my knee's messed up, my ankle, whatever. Man, my shoulder's been bugging me. You know, this kind of stuff because of how hard they were training. And so it's just, you know, something to keep in mind, because I remember when I was younger, and this is something I see from a lot of people, when they get an injury, they think that, oh no, I'm injured. You know, what am I going to do? And it's just worth remembering that most of the competitors that are out there trained really hard and they're injured a little bit too.
Yeah.
They've all got some injuries, just like listening to guys talk about like NFL. I remember listening to a podcast where there was an NFL player and he was talking about how as the year went on, the whole friggin' team's injured, but you got to keep playing. So he's got a broken collarbone. He's still playing football, right? And then at the end of the year, you do all your surgeries. So you get done. All right, we're all going to get our surgeries, get stuff fixed up, and then the next year you come do it. You know, and so everybody who is training hard is putting themselves out there. They're all working through something, and so it's just, if you have an injury, you do your best to work around it, but don't let it get into your head too much, because everybody's dealing with it.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people. It depends on the injury. Now, there's some obviously.
Yeah, there's some serious ones out there.
You shouldn't train through, but like,
if you got like an ACL tear, you should probably not train through or compete. You should probably get that fixed.
Right. And sprains, and you know, there's different stuff, and there's different things you can do. And I think a lot of these athletes, and we talked to some on the podcast before the ADCC trials, were injured. I don't know if we can.
We don't have to talk about it.
We don't have to say who it was, but like they had a pretty bad knee injury, and they're like, "Hey, I'm going to be able to get there. I'm going to try to keep myself together and try to train as much as I can." So you got to work around, whether it's like, all right, maybe I can't do live rounds, so I'm going to do get on the air and get to work on that to keep my cardio up. I mean, I think like if you talk about, we were talking about the meta or whatever, I think there are some overarching themes. Like you got to be in shape, right? You got to have.
If you want to have a meta, it's that you got to be in shape. That's like if you look at the podium of all the divisions, you know, none of those people were just sloppy and out of shape.
Yeah,
like that's the meta. You know, when you're talking about jiu-jitsu and competing and being at your best, you need to be 100%.
Yep. And that's like, can you work around your stuff? Can you still implement your technique, or do you have enough variety in your game where you can kind of still be very effective, maybe not doing your A stuff, or maybe going to a different side or whatever. So there's ways you can work around it. And I think there's something to be said about the adrenaline of the tournament. You kind of start to maybe forget about certain injuries. You could get after it.
Yeah, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was something where, again, we're not going to say their name, but one of the people that placed third, you know, that we know, was talking to them, and they had a staph infection.
Yeah.
You know, not that far back, that they were getting, you know, they'd take time off the mat to get it, you know, healed up. And while they're doing that, they're just getting on the bike and doing some rounds and stuff and trying to keep their cardio together, because again, you know, you can keep that together. And if your cardio is good, then you'll be able to move. You're not going to lose all your skill overnight.
Right.
You know, and so that's something, like you said, you can work around everything. But kind of going back to the meta, I forgot to add that. Yeah, like there is a meta, and it's that everybody's in shape.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you're trying to compete, or if you're trying to be a good jiu-jitsu practitioner, you know, your diet, your training, your like lifting weights,
your
lifestyle, all those things. And again, I'm not saying that you have to live in the gym, because again, people have families and work, and you can't just train all day long like a 20-year-old. But you can eat reasonably, right? Which is going to be the bulk of you like gaining or losing weight. You know, you could train your tail off, but you go eat like one like package of Reese cups, and you've literally just you've basically outworked your diet through eating for several hours, right? I mean, like you think about it, like you're only burning so many calories from training. You're not burning as many as you probably think you are. Sometimes I see those Fitbits and they're like, I burned 1,000 calories. Like, bullshit. You didn't burn 1,000 calories, no way. If you're burning 1,000 calories, that's some serious work. Not happening. So you're burning a smaller amount than you think, because most of our calories are burned just living. Like if you look at where you actually burn the most calories, it's just being alive. And so that's where you burn the most. You burn a small amount through exercise. And so if you go eat, you go get done training and then you go eat some crap food, it's going to you're not going to lose any weight. It is what it is. But that said, if you get a good diet, start doing a little bit of strength training when you can squeeze it in, or a little bit of cardio when you can squeeze it in, whatever, that makes a big deal. It pays off big time, and being in shape is important, which kind of goes into something else. I was talking to several people this past weekend who were at different weight classes, and they were sort of at the lower end of the weight class, and they were kind of fluffy. And this isn't I have no problem if you're if you've got some fluff on you, who gives a crap, right? But if you're going to compete, there's no advantage to you being in a division where you're on the small end and you've got weight to lose in a sport that, where physicality comes into play. So again, if you could say, well, you could lose 10 pounds and you would be carrying less fat around, that really isn't being useful to you. Because think about it, like if I'm carrying around a couple of jugs of milk worth of fat in my stomach and my body, that's not helping me perform, right? Non-lean body mass. But if I lean out, I'm not going to be carrying around as much weight, which is going to be good. My cardio, your cardio will get better. This is something that, anytime you cut weight and you do it the right way and you just lose that fat, but you maintain most of your muscle, you feel like you're moving faster. You feel like your cardio is getting better because your body doesn't have to carry around. Yeah. Imagine carrying around 2 jugs of milk on your body. It's a lot of weight. No. So then you get rid of that. And then, you can be in a lower weight class where you'll be a bigger person for that weight class, which again, not to say that's always going to be an advantage, but a lot of times it is, where you're bigger for your weight class. That's usually a good thing. And so if you're getting ready for a competition and you're a little bit on the smoother side, it's a useful idea to get trimmed up. Get on a good diet. Diet's the important thing. Do it slowly. Don't do a crash diet. Lose weight. Like if you're trying to cut, like, let's say 10 pounds or something, do it over the course of like 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. Where you're only losing maybe a pound or 2 a week. And it'll come off nice and slow. If you don't know how to do these things, hire a nutrition coach. I know that a lot of times people, it's not cheap most of the time, but the thing is it'll do wonders for you. It'll probably educate you on how to eat properly for your performance. This is the thing with my buddy Eli, my coach. I can eat and I understand how food's affecting my performance. I understand how food's affecting the way that I look. And if I want to change that, it's not like some secret. It's not a magic thing. It's like literally, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change these few things. And then all of a sudden the weight comes down. And that's such an interesting or a educational thing. And so it's something just like we hire coaches to teach us jiu-jitsu. We hire professors to teach us subjects in school. If you don't know jack squat about nutrition, like save yourself the time if you can, and pay it to a coach who can then guide you through the process. Can be very, very useful. And I think for a lot of people would make those weight cuts much easier, because I saw a lot of people struggling to cut weight. And here's the thing about, I think we've talked this in the podcast. Let's say if you've got a heavier set person who's fluffy and you got a lean person, they weigh the exact same weight. So let's say they weigh 200 pounds. The person with the lower body fat percentage will be able to cut more weight more easily, because muscle holds more water, whereas fat does not. Fat's around 10%. Muscles around 70. So you can deflate those muscles, so to speak, and just cut that water out. This is why if you look in the UFC, the guys who can cut massive amounts of water are typically jacked. They're pretty lean. But then the guys who struggle a lot of times, and not always, there's exceptions, but the guys that struggle a lot of times, they're carrying around some fluff on them. You know what I mean? Like, and again, if you have a pound of fat, a pound of muscle, we can take more water out of that muscle than we can the fat. And so if you have to do that last minute water cut at the end, it's better to be on the leaner side. But again, a lot of times for a lot of us jiu-jitsu people, you can cut out a lot of just junk food, a lot of food that you don't need, and not even junk food sometimes, just, getting the right portions of the right macronutrients. And you'll feel like a monster on the mats. You'll have great performance and you'll be able to cut the weight properly. So again, just, you want to be on the leaner side with a sport that is focused on endurance and physicality. There's no advantage for us to carry around excess weight that isn't aiding us in our performance.
Do you think if you can remember, what was the time between matches for athletes? They keep it pretty
at the tournament.
Yeah.
So at the trials, they're generally pretty good. So at the early stages, you're getting around 45 minutes to 50
between
minutes
each match.
and then as it gets a little bit closer, around 20, 25, which again, some people hate that, but I love that because, when you have these tough matches, it is tough to recover. It doesn't get any easier the older you get. It's tough to recover after a really brutal match and then come right back.
Yep.
And I think that it honestly makes for better competitions because you have enough time in between matches to recover and then give the next match your all. I think that sometimes, like, especially like IBJJF style tournaments where, they just run it fast. You're like, boom, 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 boom. You're just running one after the other. And you have like 10, sometimes you'll have like, let's say if your match is 6 minutes, you'll have 6 minutes to rest and then come back, like you're in the gym. And it is brutally tough to be ready within that short time period. And a lot of times it's not about who's the best. It's just like, well, who's got the cardio to last?
Whose recovery is the best.
Yeah, who's the recovery. So if you're younger, your recovery is going to be better. If your nutrition's more dialed in and you know how to like take dextrose supplements and stuff to get the sugars back into your system, you're probably going to fare better. But again, I think that these longer rest times are helpful, especially for us older cats. I know that like in 2018, when I did it, I had a match with a really tough black belt, young, tough black belt. And we went into overtime. And after I was done, I was just sitting over in the corner. I had that lung burn where it feels like you taste blood in your mouth. And I'm just breathing heavy. There's a picture, the young woman that I hired to take pictures. She was there and she was on Facebook like, hey, if you need pictures, let me know. I was like, oh, I'll pay you. And so she took pictures while I was there and I just looked at her and she was taking a picture of me. I stuck my tongue out and I just said, I'm really tired.
Yep.
And, luckily I had 50 minutes to rest and I came back for the next match. I was ready to go. And I went out there and submitted the guy in less than 3 minutes because I was ready to go. Had I not had that rest, I would have been struggling.
Yep.
Would have been struggling hard. So I like having those long rests.
Yeah, I think it's good, but knowing what to do, like if knowing how much time you have to, if you can let your body cool down and warm back up, unless you have a shorter time, you got to stay warm. And so you can't go through that whole process of letting your body chill out and then come back up. So
yeah, well,
knowing that, knowing what to eat and when to eat and how much, super, super helpful, beneficial as well.
Yeah. And if you guys are competing, you should probably, as soon as your match is over, cool down for a second, but then put your hoodies and stuff back on. Like get something to kind of keep your body warm and then start rehydrating yourself. And even if here's a little trick for you, if you ever go to an IBJJF tournament and you need a little bit more time, I always tell my guys, go take a walk. Just go take a walk, go to the bathroom. And if someone's like, we're calling them back, just like, I got to go piss. Yep. I got to go to the bathroom, right? Give me a minute. And because they'll call you, they're not going to DQ you like within like 2 seconds. You have time. So like one of my guys one year, at an IBJJF tournament, he was super tired. And I told him to go take a walk. He said, well, they're going to be calling my name in a few minutes. I said, I'll let them know you went to use the restroom. Go take a walk. Go to the bathroom, take a nice stroll, catch your breath. Yeah. They'll wait. And so, they were calling him. I went to the mat and said, hey, he's using the bathroom. He'll be right back in a few minutes. They ran a couple other matches and then they came back to him when he was back, so you can work around it. Sometimes you have to play that game. You back in when I was like a blue belt, we used to call hide in the belt. We'd get done with our match, and then someone would they would be calling, "Oh, I gotta go grab my belt. I threw it over there," and you'd just go grab your belt and you'd come back and just take a nice long walk. Just some random ideas. Here is something just kind of thinking about this. If you're a good competitor, this is just a random conversation that maybe some of you guys are finding interesting. I was talking to a guy who I'm not gonna say his name, but because again, this is our conversation in private, whatever. But the ideas can be useful. But was a trials winner himself at one point, had placed in the ADCC championships, multiple time world champ, very tough guy. And we were talking about how if you're a good competitor, one of the hardest things is to let go of that identity because he's getting older and we're all getting older, and we're talking about that because again, you become attached to it. And, I forgot where I heard this, but I love the idea of focusing on the verb and identifying with the verb rather than the noun. So what I mean by noun is like, I say, I am a competitor. That is a thing. I am a competitor versus no, I'm competing at this tournament. Like I am who I am, but I'm going to go do these things. Yeah. But a lot of times we get attached to pleasant identities, right? We can have all these little letters next to our name or these titles next to our name, and we become very attached to them. this is why, like, I'll post stuff about my wins, but I don't, like, in my Instagram profile, a lot of times, people put gold medal here, whatever. I'm like, I don't post any of that stuff because I don't want to identify with it. I'm more than a medal. I'm more than this. Yes, I've done those things, but that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And I never want to identify with those because I want to be free from them because I know they're not going to last. They're ephemeral, right? That moment in time where you stand up on the podium and you get that gold medal and you're feeling like you're high on everything, it lasts for a few minutes and it's gone. And you don't want to identify with that because it becomes like a drug. And so we were talking like, man, he was saying it's really hard to sit here and watch this because it's almost painful because I want to be out there doing it. And he's got some injuries that he's working through and he can't do it right now. But this is just something as a side note, whether you're a hardcore competitor or maybe some other aspect of your life, you've got this very pleasant identity. You've got like a promotion, a rank, an identity that people look up to or whatever it might be. Understand that thing that's there, it's only there for a moment. It's there for a short time, and be careful with it because, again, we're only going to be these different things for a period of time. Everything's changing. And so we won't be that person, especially when it comes to athletics. We're not going to be in that seat of being the best competitor, the best this, that, whatever, forever. It's there for a moment. We enjoy it. Enjoy your time in the sun, but you have to be willing to let it go. And so that's the idea of that you want to identify with the verb, not the noun, so to speak. So it's a useful idea. But again, I was thinking about that because we were talking and hearing such a high level guy just struggling with it. And this is something I've seen. This is why you see fighters fight too long. You see boxers fight too long. Mike Tyson's getting ready to fight Jake Paul, which I'm sure, it's good money. So, hey, whatever. But at the same time, you're like, why are you still fighting? I guess the money's good, whatever. But, he's 60, whatever. He's like in his 60s. Like, he doesn't need to be fighting. Like, he needs to be just chilling, like hanging out. But if he needs money, then it is what it is. That's how he's going to make it. But I feel like Mike Tyson's also made a lot of money outside of boxing. But you see even jiu-jitsu competitors. I've watched several guys run their bodies into the ground to the point where their bodies are just broken because they kept chasing that dragon of competing, because that feeling of getting onto the podium, it can be like a drug. If you're not careful, because you get up there, you feel so good, you're this, that, whatever, and come back and everybody's congratulating, yo, man, you're so amazing. It feels so good to be in that moment, and then it goes away pretty quick. And then you have like kind of that crash where that letdown where you're, oh, okay, and so you got to be careful. It's something that you see all the time.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just like you think about most of the people at the tournament walked away with an L. The last
over half of them walked away with an L at the first round.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just like you're going to lose eventually. You're going to, maybe your last tournament or high level tournament, you may have to walk away eventually. Just like, a very small percentage win and continue to win. And eventually those people will end up losing as well. Once kind of time catches up to them and your body starts to break down, and the young guns that are those young blue and purple belts come in and they're just like have no fear. And they have nothing to lose. And but it's cool to see that, and it's cool to see the older guys. Cool to see kind of a little bit of the changing of the guard. I guess you see a lot of these guys, they're in their early 20s, mid 20s. A lot of these over 30 guys that have been high level competitors for a long time or not. They're not winning, or they're still relevant, but they're not maybe at the top. And it's just fun to see that, and we'll see more of that at actual ADCC Worlds. You're going to see these guys that have been there.
It'll be interesting before. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Some of the older guys that have won, how do they do? How's Gordon going to do? He hasn't really competed at all, or not even that rule set. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see all that, and it's interesting to see the young guys without any they can just redline their bodies and just go all out, and it's just fun. It's fun to watch. It makes the matches and the rule set kind of conducive to that and kind of exciting. But we did talk about a little bit, the no points round, or the first half of the match, up until the finals is three points, or 3 minutes no points, 3 minutes points,
and then in the finals it's 4-4.
It's 4 and 4.
It's 8 minutes.
And we kind of talked about that. Is there any some people would go after it and try to go for the finish?
Yeah, if you look at the guys like the Varela, Andy Varela, you look at the Tackett brothers, you look at Pixley, you look at a lot of guys. There's a lot of dudes, Kyle Bain. You look at a lot of these dudes, they were out there to finish.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing. Like so you actually look at their matches, and for most of them, it's a relatively short amount of time. They submit people in a very short amount of time. They were there to finish people.
Yeah.
Even in the finals, the Tackett brothers, I mean, they weren't there to compete for the points. They were there to finish, and friggin' slick. It was slick watch them. But a lot of people play the points rounds. I would say the majority of people, they sort of go into the match because there's always this worry that you will go hard for the finish, and then you end up on the second half with without the full gas tank that you need,
right?
Without the energy that you need to beat the person. Because what happens if you don't get the submission? Then what do you do? And so that's a problem. And so a lot of people will play very passively in the points round, or in the non-point round, sub-only round, and then they'll kick it up in the points rounds. And there's a lot of that. It's even more so because it's a relatively short amount of time in the trials, 6 minutes matches with 8 minutes in the finals. It's even worse to me in the championships where the matches become longer.
Was it 10 and
5 and 5, 10
and
10, yeah.
10
and those, and you think 10-minute match is a long time. So if you don't need to go 100%, you're probably not going. So what do you see most of the time? Not all of them, in the championship matches, you see a lot of hand fighting, pushing, shoving, whatever, and then they'll go as the match shortens down. And so I would personally, I think it would be fun if they made the sub-only round worth something, because again, they're judging the points. It is worth something. So if it goes to a ref's decision at the end, they will judge the match in its entirety. Yeah. So let's say that you just got dog walked in the first half of the sub-only match, and then it was very close for the rest of the match, that you're going to win because you won the first, or whoever won the sub-only round, they're going to win. But it would be interesting. I just think it would be interesting as a experiment would be to keep the rounds on the shorter side. Like when you get to championships, to say 4 and 4, 4 and 4, 8-minute match. I mean, to see. And then you say whoever wins the sub-only round gets 1 point at the start of the point round, because they're keeping track of who's initiating, which is really what they're judging on, is who's initiating stuff. They're like, it's literally like a tally system. And so it would be interesting to see, okay, at the end of this, like whoever wins the round gets 1 point at the start of points rounds. So now there's one person leading, and I mean, you're going to have people fighting furiously to try to win and try to initiate. So again, it wouldn't be just a sub-only round anymore. It would be sub-only, but there's no necessary points, but it would mean something. Mm-hmm. I think that would be an interesting thing to make that non-point round worth something, because as it stands right now, a lot of times, to me, the championships, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I find a lot of the matches at the trials a little bit more exciting to watch, especially like once you're in like that top 16, man. I mean, they're all good people, and again, they're maybe not the best of the best, but because the rounds are so much shorter, the action is faster. Whereas you get into, like, say, a 10-minute match, you're going to slow down a little bit, especially when you're going to have more 10-minute matches against the best people in the world and people that know how to play the rules, where you can have, like, remember was it Isaac Michel and Wagner Rocha's match? They must have exchanged back mount 7 times, but neither one of them ever got points because they knew how to play the game. So they were turtling back and forth. And so it would be interesting to see, shortening the time down. So this way people could just go a little harder during the rounds instead of trying to conserve their energy, especially even like the super fights. I think the super fights are terrible. Like, you think, I mean, we got just like, what is it, 10 and 10, 20 minutes with an extra 10-minute overtime?
Yeah, it's a long time.
It's so long. So, when in your mind, you're not preparing for a submission, you're preparing for what happens if this goes 20. That's in the back of your head.
I think that the super fight's even longer.
It might be longer.
I feel like it's 20 and 20.
It's really long.
It's long.
It's 20 with an extra, it's like a 20-minute match with a 20-minute overtime or something like that.
I think it's what it is.
And so what are you preparing for? In your head, you're preparing for, I might have a 40-minute match.
Yeah.
Whereas you're saying, what if it's shorter? Like, if it's a 6-minute match, then you're saying I prepare for a 6-minute match. Even if I'm going to try to submit them earlier, I'm ready for a 6-minute. If it's a 8-minute match, you're preparing for that. So I think it would be better to have shorter matches for a spectator standpoint, and I think it would make the action more exciting overall. And I think just because it would keep the pace a lot faster. And that's something to understand, is that you got to know the rules.
Yeah. I
saw a lot of little tactical blunders at the tournament for different reasons. Like, one was someone pulled guard. So if you guys don't know the rule set, you get a negative point in the points rounds if you pull guard, but not in the sub-only round. with the exception of the finals, where at any point, if you pull guard, you always get a negative point, even in the sub-only round. But there's workarounds. If it's in the non-point rounds, I can let you take me down and take me to the ground. If you watch Gordon Ryan and Nicky Rod, he did that. He just gave him his leg and let him take him down.
Yeah.
Because he's like, all right, I want to be on the ground anyway, but I'm not going to do this in the final. So here, you took me down, right? Or you can shoot in for a takedown. Even during the points rounds, you shoot in for a takedown. And if you hold the takedown, the position for 3 seconds, you can then sit back. And so there's workarounds to it. And I saw several situations, both at the West Coast and East Coast trials, where people would give up the negative point that you accrue from pulling guard, and they didn't have to. There's ways to work around. Oh, what are you doing? But there were other little tactical blunders I saw where people made little mistakes when they were rolling. And I think, again, it's one of those things where if you're going to do a tournament like the trials, you really need to know the rules. They have videos online showing you the rule sets, like, and how it works, and basically a rules meeting. And then you should watch a lot of the matches, because when you watch the matches, you actually get to sort of develop a kind of IQ for it, where you start to see positions over and over again. You see patterns that exist.
Yeah.
And you can prepare for those, because, every time a match happens, sometimes there's just unique situations that pop up that you just never think about. And then when you see, oh, okay, that's what you can do if this happens. So then if you find yourself in that situation yourself, you can be better prepared for it. And so it's a good idea. Like, if you're going to compete under any particular rule set, you should watch the rule set you're going to compete against. Flow grappling, love them or hate them, they have tons of matches you can watch. Get on YouTube, tons of matches you can watch, and go through the brackets you're thinking about competing, and just watch people compete, so that you can see how people deal with certain situations and the different stuff that might happen.
Yeah, maybe even, like, we also talked about strategies, like, make sure you stick to your guns. Kind of what that time, trials is probably not the time to test out some things or get in positions maybe you are not the best at.
Yeah.
Probably just play your game, stick to your guns. That's kind of one of those things, like in any sport, right? Well, if you're a boxer, you want me to keep it on the feet, getting certain exchanges or whatever.
Well, sure. It's like UFC, or MMA, where you'd watch guys who were amazing wrestlers, amazing grapplers, and then for whatever reason, they wanted to start to stand up and do fight, and then they get knocked out.
Sure.
You're like, bro, what brought you to the big show?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't ever start to add things in there, but you better be super confident before you start to open up with a brand new aspect of your game that hasn't been tested.
Yeah.
And so it's generally better, especially the ADCC, like with the way our sport works. If you're trying to incorporate something new into your game, unless you're one of the best guys in the world that doesn't ever compete, you more than likely you're going to be competing at regional tournaments. Open up in some of those regional tournaments, test it out, see how it works, find people, whatever. But when you get to the big shows, when you're going to the trials, or you're going to the championships, or you're going to, worlds or pans or whatever, that's where you're basically trying to get down to whatever it is that you do best and trying to use that against a person, right? That's what you're focused on the most. Not saying, all right, let's see how things work. No, that's the wrong time. Let's focus on what got you to there and what's going to help you win and basically increase your chances. Because really, that's what we're doing. When you think about a competition, there's always a percentage of chance that you could lose.
Sure.
Who knows what those percentages are, but there's always a chance. That's what makes it fun to watch, because we always know there's a chance, right? Even like Gordon Ryan goes against someone. Hey, there's a chance. You never know, right? So it's fun to watch because there is a chance. And so really what you're doing is, by playing a position that you're better at, that sort of thing, all you're doing is increasing your chances. And every time that you then allow them to play a position that they're good at, you're now letting them, or playing a position that you're weak at, you're now increasing the chances that they could beat you. So you're just basically trying to increase your chance. That's all it really is.
Yeah. And that's kind of like we talked about a little bit, why some of these younger grapplers that have a very high skill level at certain aspects of grappling can utilize that and win if they kind of take the game or take the match to where they want it, whether it's wrestling, whether it's leg locks, whatever it is, they can put in that their little realm, and they can kind of really force the match that way. They can, they may not be very well rounded, but they may be able to win just because they can force the match into how they want to play out.
Maybe. And that was some guys, I think, but the guys that like won first place and stuff, regardless of what belt those guys are, those guys, I'm sure, if you rolled with them, they're jiu-jitsu nerds.
Yeah, they can do everything.
Like there was the guy Vince who took second in the plus 99. Good wrestler and has great leg locks. Like, so he was getting taken down. He jumped into a knee bar. right? So he countered a takedown with a knee bar. Had he not get the knee bar, he may have lost the turn, right? He may have lost, but he countered, he got the knee bar and got a finish. He's very good. You know, and then there's different guys that are very good in other positions, and there's guys that are really good at guards, and they were good at wrestling up for takedowns. You know, so they're very well rounded, and so they can play pretty much anywhere. And so I think that's another thing too. If you look at like most of the best guys, most of the people that won, they can kind of play anywhere. Like for instance, Mike Perez, probably the most, and we're going to talk to him soon. Probably the most, to me, one of the most impressive performances that day, because he's 175 pounds, give or take, and he won the plus 99 division. Now, this isn't his first time if I'm correct, I think he's done this before. But again, this is a guy who's been to the ADCC multiple times. He's a good wrestler, can definitely wrestle. But, you know, he's up in the weight class with big dudes, so he wasn't wrestling much. He was playing a lot of De La Hiva, reverse De La Hiva, leg locks, things like that. And he was playing the game that he had to play, and went out there and beat everybody, won the damn thing. And it was impressive to watch, being that weight, mitigating the power and speed and size of some of these big guys, these athletic, strong, big guys, and then getting the win. It was super impressive to watch. And so, you know, that was a guy where very well-rounded. He can wrestle. He can play the bottom. You know, he can play all these different positions, knew how to play the rules to a T, made them work for his game, and then he was able to execute. And but you know, again, he's obviously a black belt and been a black belt for a long time. But that's just the thing with those guys that are at that high level. They're very well rounded. They're not simply, I can do this one thing. And I think that's important, because you're going to find yourself in situations sometimes that you didn't plan for. If you're a really good wrestler, you're going to find yourself on your back at some point, whether they out wrestle you or they sweep you. So what are you going to do then? You know, you have to have something. Or if you're the, you know, guard player, you're going to find yourself on top sometimes, because sometimes guys will pull on you first. What are you going to do when they pull? And you got something ready for them. You know, you got to think about those things. And so you don't want to, or you might need points. It's like, there's a couple guys couple good guard players, good leg lockers, that lost matches because they had no takedowns, right? They basically were down points. They needed to get points. They were on the feet in the overtime rounds or whatever. And now they just didn't have a chance to win, because they were no longer able to play their position because they were down points and they're not getting the takedown. So you don't want to be in that situation where you can't wrestle. You may not be the best wrestler, but you should still have an option to do it and be able to play pretty much anywhere. And I think, you know, some of these guys, they may not be black belts, but they're very well rounded, very skilled from pretty much anywhere. And it shows when they were competing. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully you got something from that. Again, these were just random ideas. This is from my notes that I was taking down as I was going through the day. There's a lot of stuff. If you guys are on my email list, which you guys can join if you want to by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, you know, you'll see some of that stuff sprinkled in there, because I'll talk about this, because there were some great conversations I had, good ideas that I shared with people, were good questions that I was talking with from people. So there'll be some stuff coming up on the YouTube and the emails as well. Real quick, as we got a few new reviews on the podcast. And is this on Apple?
Yeah, well, it's through Apple.
Is Apple the only one that does reviews?
No, they can do you can do a multiple. You can do Spotify, I think, and you can do, these were from Apple. So if you want to hear, I've got let's take it out here. So so we got some just the top two. It's got a couple new ones.
So we got a couple here. All right, let's check them out. So this is from 32224. Great podcast. Is 5 stars, great podcast. We've got 722 ratings at 4.9 stars. Appreciate you guys. 727 of you guys decided. Hey, it's pretty awesome. So it's a great podcast, 5 stars. Started jiu-jitsu a few years ago and got interrupted by the pandemic and injury. Oh, the pandemic. That was fun, wasn't it? Finally back training, and this podcast is part of the reason why. Listening to Down to Earth Guy with his guests motivates me to get right back to training. Thank you. Keep getting after it. The name got sick. Got sig. I don't know what that is, but appreciate you and glad to have you back on the mats. It's I know the pandemic definitely threw a wrench into everybody's stuff, and then a lot of times once you get out of those rhythms, it's very tough to get back into them. This is where, you know, a lot of times, anytime you're trying to add a new routine into the mix, you've got to fight. You've got to fight for that routine, because it's as soon as you start trying to add it in, it's as if life decides to the universe begins to conspire against you, which is why a lot of times I say, like, the toughest opponent that we have isn't like anyone on the mats, it's life. You know, you got kids, you know, they're getting sick, your wife's upset about something, or, you know, your spouse, whatever, your spouse, husband, whomever, because I know we have a lot of ladies that listen to the podcast, but just anything happens, right? When you're trying to get something going, and then you got to fight for it. and it's tough. So thank you guys. Thank you for the review. Also, we got one here from McDowell 23. Says great content for us BJJ lovers. I'm sure it'd be interesting if a non-jiu-jitsu person read that.
BJJ.
I know that like a lot of times, like when non-jiu-jitsu people see the word BJJ, they like leave out a J.
Yeah.
And they're like, anyway, says, I love the content on both the podcast and YouTube. Always a good listen. Never feel like you're dumb or inferior for being a lower belt. So appreciate you. And yeah, you're not inferior for being a lower belt. It's interesting how that works, right? Like I talked to several people who at the ADCC this past weekend who had, they've been listening to the podcast. They've been listening to the YouTube, some of them since they were white belts, and now they're black belts competing at this damn thing. And it's interesting how that works, right? Like, because there's so much stuff that we go through, and there's so much stuff that is like a black belt or someone that's been doing this stuff for 20 years plus. There's so many things that you forget are just normal.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting since Jess and I, have an infant running around the house. It's so interesting to think about all the little things that you know how to do that a child just doesn't know. For instance, like, the other day he's eating with a spoon.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, look at him go. And he's, clumsily eating with a spoon. Like, huh. Like, how cool is that? You can pick things up and you have the dexterity and the control to move something around. Yes, it seems so simple, but, a long time ago, that was really tough for you at some point, right? And when you think about jiu-jitsu newbies coming in, it's so easy to get disconnected from the fact that you were used to be one of those people. You used to be so uncoordinated that you couldn't shrimp down the damn mats because you were like flipping and flopping everywhere. There was a point in time where, a couple of rounds of rolling just gassed you, and a lot of times it's very easy to become disconnected from that and not have a little grace for the people as they're getting started. Or even in the first few years, because again, those first 3 to 5 years, you're experiencing a lot of stuff for the first time and you're going through a lot of difficulty and a lot of things that are just tough. And so, yeah, I try not to make people feel stupid because we're all dealing with our own stuff. And I know sometimes you'll get in the comments on YouTube, especially, and people will say, oh, this guy's so stupid, whatever. And I'm like, it's his problem. You got your own problems. We all got our own problems. That's his problem, right? None of us are perfect. We're all struggling. And so a lot of times when we do the videos or when we talk on the podcast and answer questions, we're talking to you guys because we're not here to judge you.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to like sort of help out. I think of my sort of place in the jiu-jitsu sort of ecosphere is like my guy. I'm like I'm like part of the guy that, like, if there's a video game, I'm like the guy in the tutorial. Like I can train you to be advanced.
Jiu-jitsu tutorial.
Like, for instance, people that train in my gym, I have plenty of advanced people. I'm one of Brandon's coaches, and we did this, and I've had multiple. We've had multiple people be able to win worlds and pans and stuff at my gym, so I can teach advanced stuff. But I think about where my place is on the internet as far as the jiu-jitsu sphere. It's like, hey, you're here. Welcome. Let me show you the ropes. Let me answer all those questions that are going through your head right now that nobody talks about in your gym. Let me make this make a little bit more sense. And then at some point, you may not listen to me forever. You may, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm going to get you up to speed so that you can become better. And that's my job. I like that job because I feel like there's more people that need help at that point than, a skilled black belt who's killing it. They don't need my help. They're good, and so there's a lot more people that early on that need a lot of help. And so I'm happy to do it. So anyway, appreciate those comments. By the way, if you guys want to leave a positive review for the podcast and share something, we'd be happy to see it. It always helps out. It does help out a lot. So again, even if you don't want to join the Patreon, but you're like, I really like the podcast and would love to support somehow, that's one way you can do it. You can get on to, Apple, Spotify, wherever you can review the podcast. Give us a positive review. Talk about maybe why you like the podcast. And also for a podcasting situation, right? Like with YouTube, it's very easy for me to get on and look at the comments. How was this received? Right? I can just get in and see it. With a podcast, it's difficult because sometimes you guys send messages on Instagram and things like that. And that's fine. But otherwise, we don't know. So we're listening. We're doing this stuff, and we're like, well, hope they enjoy this one.
Yep.
So if you guys find something that you like about the podcast and you'd like to let us know, do a review and leave it there, or send us a message on Instagram,
yep.
or whatever. So anyway, big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, if you guys have never tried CBD, I'm always encouraging people to try it. You may not like it, you may love it. Everybody's a little bit different, just like any supplement that's out there. Some people will swear by creatine. Other people are like, take it or leave it. Try it out and see what kind of effect it gives to you. They've got a really cool new product, which is based on CBN. So there's different cannabinoids, which is what CBD is. This one's based on CBN, and the product is called Stay Asleep. And from the studies and everything that they're doing on it, essentially what it does is it helps you stay asleep. There was a product, I feel like it may have been like a prototype or something they were testing a couple of years ago that we tried, and it was a CBN product. And again, it was a little spray that we could use. And with that product, the way that again, what I noticed was that at the time I was struggling to sleep, and I was doing that thing where you just like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys, especially after training. Sometimes you'll be asleep and you just bounce up. Like, especially if it's a late training session, I'll be asleep and then I'll bounce out of it and I'll be wide awake. So I'll have like I'll sleep for 20 minutes and pop right back up. And then it'll take me a little while to sort of wind down and go back to sleep. I don't know if it's ever happened to you guys. It happens to me sometimes. With that said, this product is supposed to be helpful towards staying asleep. Now, I have never tried this one, so I can't say for sure that it's going to work, but I will give it a try. But I know that one of the other previous products, when I was having trouble sleeping some nights, I would do the little spray, which was a CBN product, and it did seem to help stay asleep. So I'm going to try this one out, and I'll let you guys know how it goes because they're going to send us a sample, and we'll give it a whirl and tell you how it affects us, and then you can sort of decide from there. But if you find anything on their website at Charlotte's Web that you like, use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu30 for 30% off the order at checkout. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at epicrollbjj.com. Epic Roll is a jiu-jitsu brand and gear company that's made by a black belt for jiu-jitsu practitioners. Matt, again, he's a jiu-jitsu practitioner that competes. He does all that stuff. He started the company some years ago. A super cool guy. He's out there supporting a lot of people that are out there competing. He's involved with a competition that's coming up called the PGF, which is super cool, and you should definitely check it out. My buddy Brandon McGaffron, that was what he started too. And again, it's going to be super cool this year. It's out in Vegas. But again, if you go onto his website, just browse through his stuff. He's got a lot of cool t-shirts, gis, rash guards, shorts. I love his no-gi stuff. You wear it all the time. And again, you look through it and figure out what you like. If you find something that sort of strikes your fancy, use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order at checkout and save a little bit of dough. Also, thanks to Manscaped for helping support the podcast. Again, we're both bearded people.
We are.
You didn't go. Did you got your beard a little bit longer when
it's longer. I'm going to trim it though.
But do you think did you start letting your beard grow out when you shaved your head? I feel like that's like the look, right? It's like, know. I feel like me and Brandon were talking. Brandon, like, he shaves his head now, but he lets his beard grow out.
Yeah.
But when his hair was like, when he had a lot of more hair on his head, he didn't grow his beard out.
I don't know. Like, I would just grow it, and sometimes just get lazy about trimming it. So I think that maybe does. I don't know.
Okay. Well, regardless, guys, I sort of random there.
I try to look like Kratos from God of War.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the look, right?
Did you do that? Have you done that for
no?
Halloween?
I'm planning on it. Could
do like a nice like lean cut.
I need to get buff, dude.
To get like a cut like a lean, like to get real leaned out, and then do your little red
body stripe. Yeah. I was like, it'd be all right. I think I can pull that one off.
But again, random. Sorry, I'm a ADD sometimes. Squirrel. Yeah. But again, that said, if you guys are a man, or if you know a man in your life that would like to step up their grooming game with some amazing products that basically you can take care of yourself from head to toe, everything from your balls to your beard. You can take care of it. They've got trimmers for the nether region. They've got trimmers for your beard, specifically for those. They've got body washes, colognes. I mean, it's anything and everything that you could possibly need as a man to groom yourself, they make. And again, I know that these products, a lot of times with, like, you talk about a grooming product, it's like, for a lot of guys, it's not really on our radar. We're not like, oh, and you know what I need? I need a better set of trimmers, or I need a better cologne, or I need a better set of nail trimmers. It's just not something you think about. But then you get a hold of them and you're like, it's pretty nice, you know? So it's kind of nice to have nice things. And so again, if you guys would like to try out some of their products, go to their website at manscaped.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order and free shipping. Everything I've tried from them has been incredibly high quality. And so I feel very comfortable sharing it with you. And last but not least, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to the Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join, you'll get access to the exclusive library that we've created for you. We've been creating it and adding to it for the last, 5 years. 5 years. Yeah. It's been a long time. And again, there's everything in there that goes back to our guests, where we have specific tips from each one of our guests that you could use for your training. There is lots of videos that have never been released on YouTube, me going into different ideas, sharing different things, narrated roles, whatever it might be. There's also sort of the cornerstone pieces that are in there. We have a warm-up routine, several from Eugene, showing stretches, and cool downs, things that you could use to help improve the mobility of your body and loosen things up, specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners. And also I have some seminars that I recorded in there that go into some of my favorite techniques for gi and for no gi techniques, basically showing you how to do both, how to do the technique in the gi, how to convert it over to no gi, that kind of thing as the grips change. And there's a lot of other stuff. But again, if you guys want to check it out, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. It's a super inexpensive price. And again, you can join up and you can stop subscribing at any time. And also to the few of you guys, I think we just had 3 new ones. Appreciate you guys for joining. Appreciate the support. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us this week. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. And again, be on the lookout in the next couple of weeks for some of the guests that we're going to have on. We have some guests lined up from the ADCC Trials, people that either competed, some that placed, some that won. And we'll be talking to them both about, training and stuff like that, but also sort of the things that center around the ADCC Trials. And in case if they're going to the championships, some of the details with that. So stick around for that and we'll talk to you soon.